Now, while the Pharisees were gathered together, Jesus asked them this question: "What do you think of the Messiah? Whose son is he?" They said to him, "The son of David." He said to them, "How is it then that David, by the Spirit, calls him Lord, saying, 'The Lord said to my Lord, sit at my right hand, until I put your enemies under your feet'? If David thus calls him Lord, how can he be his son?" No one was able to give him an answer, nor from that day did anyone dare to ask him any more questions.
All of these questions about authority and identity, and then Jesus decides to turn the tables on those who've been asking the questions. In this instance, the Pharisees. What do you think of the Messiah? Whose son is he? If you remember, this is not the first time this question has been asked. Back in chapter 16, Jesus asks Peter, "Who do you say I am?" Jesus clearly likes people to make up their own minds about who he is. And this time he's challenging the religious leaders to think differently about the identity of the Messiah. You see, they might be happy to call him the son of David, but not to admit that the son of David is the Son of God, the Messiah, the anointed one. Contrast that, of course, with Matthew, who loves the title Son of David and has no qualms in associating it with Jesus the Messiah. In fact, he's been telling us since the first verse of his Gospel. Matthew 1, verse 1, an account of the genealogy of Jesus the Messiah, the Son of David. Anyway, in response to the Pharisees' small earthly view of the phrase Son of David, Jesus gives them something much bigger to chew on. He goes back in the scriptures again and challenges the Pharisees about their interpretation of an ancient psalm. "The Lord said to my Lord, sit at my right hand until I put your enemies under your feet." Now, you might already know this, but this is the most used Old Testament passage in the whole of the New Testament, directly quoted or alluded to a whopping 37 times. Now, that should be enough to tell us that these words matter. Now, in that first verse of that psalm, it talks about two lords. The first Lord refers to Yahweh, the second to the anointed Israelite king. And in the Jewish faith, this anointed Israelite king was always the Messiah, which is where the questions arise. If David, the presumed writer of the psalm, could by some sort of divine inspiration address the Messiah as Lord, how then could this same Messiah be the son of David? The point being, as the anointed one, Jesus is both Lord and Son of David. Except this doesn't make sense unless you recognise Jesus, the man standing in front of them, as the anointed one. Jesus the Messiah, the Son of David. Jesus knew it. Matthew knew it. Peter knew it. And something tells me the Pharisees were beginning to see it too, even if they didn't like it. So, another theological debate. One where Jesus takes the initiative and silences the Pharisees. He wins. And it will be the last time he confronts them, until the trial, when in contrast he will choose to remain silent. One final thought. Perhaps what's striking about this passage is not the debate itself, but the prominence of those words quoted from the first verse of Psalm 110. "The Lord said to my Lord, sit at my right hand until I put your enemies under your feet." These were words that were used regularly in early Christian worship. Imagine us doing the same on a Sunday morning, perhaps with these words or others, affirming the identity of the Messiah. There's definitely something striking about using the words of Jesus in this way, connecting our worship to the language of the Lord, speaking truth, just as Jesus did, to affirm who he is and to bring his light into the dark places of the world.